Hi, I'm Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. I work as a senior Power Platform specialist for Vantage 365, and I'd like to welcome you to this Power Nerd presentation. Our agenda for today, we'll go through our usual introduction. Hi, that's that. And we'll discuss kind of a few other bits. We'll have just a brief overview, kind of a look at some of the more overview areas, the large spanning bits of advice I would give. Um, we'll look at some CV tips, kind of how you might structure your CV, what recruiting managers might be looking on for those CVs. We'll look at interview tips, bits in there around, what questions you might be asked and a few other bits. And then we'll have an open discussion bit at the very end where essentially you can ask to speak on the stage. We'll bring you up and we can all have a good discussion about it. Like I said, these sessions are recorded, so we can keep that for later. So, as always, I do discuss a brief rules of engagement during the course of the session. So, for the first part of the session, before we get to the discussion part, the mics are muted. If you have a question, please feel free to post it in the chat, or you can save it until the discussion or and Q&A part at the end, so that we have kind of a good recording there, and also we might answer it as we go through the course of the call. Other than that, I'm a firm believer in there's no such thing as a stupid question. So if you really want to ask the question, you think it's stupid, don't worry about it, just ask. We're here to provide that supportive environment and help everybody out. So, that being said, let's get started with the topic. So, our very first one, an overview. So this is wide-ranging advice I would give to anybody who's looking to get into the Power Platform in terms of what they need to put across for um, looking to get a job. So this very first one is a very big one. Understand your unique selling point. A lot of the time when we are working towards a role, especially one within the IT industry, we look at it in terms of my unique selling point is my IT skills. That's not always the case. What we've got to realize is there are different flavors of kind of uh, Power Platform developers. There are those who are just purely developers and maybe just need to focus on the technical stuff. But you've got people who are solution architects. Now, the role of a solution architect is to work on the end-to-end process of the project, and that includes interacting with customers. So one of your unique selling points could be that you've done sales for 10 years, okay? That brings with it a lot of soft skills and the ability to talk to people and break down complex topics into digestible kind of information for someone who's non-technical. That's a unique selling point. So when I say understand your unique selling point, what I mean is understand what you bring to the table in terms of what skills you've got from previous jobs, previous roles, or bits like that, and how you might leverage that and use it, and how it might be implemented within the kind of Power Platform space when delivering projects. It's a really good thing to do. I mean, a bit of a kind of a personal experience thing. I came from a role where I was not doing any IT. It essentially was close enough to law enforcement. Um, in that role, I wasn't doing anything IT related, but what I was able to do was I was able to talk to people. I was able to get requirements from individuals, find out what they needed to get them to, in most instances, calm themselves down, feel a bit better, or rehabilitate. That was my unique selling point. Okay, and while there were a lot of people out there who were certified, not a lot of them had that level of soft skills. Okay, so for my very first role, I wasn't certified at all. I was able to show a portfolio of work that I'd done in my personal time, and I said I'm willing to, get my PL 200 within the next 6 months. But here's all the other stuff I bring. Again, understanding that unique selling point really helped in terms of getting that first role. So take a good look at what skills you have, because you'd be surprised that a lot of them can be quite applicable. Secondly, be honest. This is a huge thing. If you don't know something when it comes to being asked about it or being queried about it, own up. Say, and I've done it in every single one of my interviews. I've been asked a question. You know what? I don't know about that because I haven't done that yet. However, if I was thinking about it, I would potentially implement X, Y, Z in this way, right? That honesty gives the recruiter or the interviewer a better idea of your capabilities, okay? And it also shows that actually being able to turn around and go, I don't know that, but I can find out, shows a level of research skill as well, okay? The other thing is, if you're not honest, it will be found out relatively quickly. I've seen this happen before. Someone said, "Oh yeah, I know how to do that in Dataverse," and then it gets to actually delivering that item. Um, it doesn't it doesn't go well, right? And the third kind of key point in terms of an overview, show a level of passion. There are so many passionate people in this kind of in the Power Platform space. You know, your people like your Shane Youngs, your Reza Doranis, Lisa Crosby. These are people who are passionate about the actual technology and what it can do. Okay, and the reason why I say show passion is actually if you have a passion for the technology, it probably means you're willing to learn. Now, from an employer perspective, okay, I would much rather, this is me speaking as potentially a hiring manager, I would much rather take someone on who is willing to learn and will develop their skills than look at than someone who's already qualified but isn't willing to learn any further than what their current skill set is. Because of the nature of Power Platform where it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, there's new features added, there's new parts added, it becomes such a minefield if you do not learn and you don't have the passion for it. So there are a few questions in the in the chat in terms of the is it necessary to get certified like PL 400 or 200 for getting a job? As I've said, my personal experience is no, but BRV has made a very good point. It can't hurt. It does improve your chances, but if you have a good portfolio of work that you can evidence, it's not entirely essential. In terms of which certification is advisable to get first, I'd go for PL 900 as your fundamentals, but it's also dependent on what kind of role you're seeking. PL 200 is a functional consultant role. Um, it can be quite useful. But if you're going for one first, PL 900 if you're starting entirely from fresh. Now, moving on to the next kind of topic, just over here. CV tips. So, obviously, your CV is the first impression that you make when it comes to someone who's interviewing you, someone who's a recruiter, something like that, right? So, it's got to stand out. Now, fortunate enough, I have a bit of a history in psychology. Um, there is a statistic out there. Essentially, a recruiter will make their decisions within first 4 seconds of reading your CV. So you need to make that first section that they look at, that profile section, engaging. Okay, it needs to stand out. It needs to jump off the page and be something slightly different from what they might normally see. So for instance, I know Jace is on the call, who is the co-founder of the Power Apps Challenge. He's recently done his his redone his CV, and actually one of his first lines is around the Power Apps Challenge and the founding of that because that's something big. It's something that catches the attention that's not going to be in every kind of profile. So try to make that first section as engaging as possible. One of the best ones I've seen come across my desk is it is a quick one is an ex-prison officer with 10 years of dealing with difficult clients. Right? It was an element of humor. Um, in terms of kind of how we do that or how we might structure a CV, um, you know, that changes from place to place. But they'll all have a profile section. Make sure it grabs attention. Okay. The other thing I see quite often, this is again me going into the hiring manager space, we see a lot of paragraphs around what solutions people have built, and they've told us, oh, it was a ticket management system. Okay, great. What you haven't told me in telling me it was a ticket management system is what parts of the Power Platform technology you've used. Make sure you make that very clear. Okay. So when you look at that, one of the best things I have seen is someone saying we've built a ticket management system leveraging Dataverse, SharePoint, Power Automate, Cloud Flows, desktop flows even. make sure you make it very clear, hey, I've used this part of the tech. We built a model driven app that did XYZ with business process flows. Okay, that's going to make you stand out from that piece in terms of that side. So, and this is a big one. One of the things I see most often is people forget to list their soft skills. Okay, when we look at this, these soft skills are things like your capability to lead user requirements meetings, the elements around talking to users and getting what you need from them in terms of that aspect. Database design, okay? We see so often that people produce entity relationship diagrams, but they leave that out of their CVs. That's a database design. That's a soft skill which is semi-technical. It's great. If you have that on your CV, that makes you stand out. So don't forget those soft skills because obviously, especially when it comes to consultancy work, those are key. You are going to be interacting with a client, so you're going to need to know how to talk to them, how to get requirements from them. Some project management aspects, time management aspects are also soft skills. There's all sorts out there that you can kind of look at, but soft skills are important. Don't entirely focus on the technical because again, a lot of the kind of the CVs we get across kind of our desk is stuff that's focused on the technical. Make your CV stand out, make it different, include those soft skills because that means you're kind of aiming yourself towards the job and the consultancy aspect of things. The final tip I'll give on the CV side of things, do a bit of research into where you're applying as well, into what the role you're applying for is. Because if you are applying for, let's say, a consultancy, they're going to want to see a range of kind of experience and go from there. Um, if you were applying for, let's say, a in-house position at a finance company, or at a insurance company, for instance, well, okay, they're going to be dealing with a lot of document management. So maybe you want to include some elements around the document management solution that you might have built or bits like that. The other thing I'd add on here, and it actually goes back to my overview kind of big tips around the show passion. Add a section in on there about your personal projects. If you've built personal projects in your own time, add it to your CV. Okay, it is huge because again it shows that learning piece, it shows that passion. It shows, hey, I've built this stuff on my own as a personal project because I wanted to. Okay, that's again another thing that kind of sets you apart, so that's a good thing. Yeah, V's just made a very brilliant comment. Removing irrelevant skills to the job. Okay, so I have seen a few where we've had someone come in with job history, and they've listed things like use of point of sale systems as a skill, right? That's not something that's relative to the actual role. Make sure that those are off there. But yeah, on the next interview tips. So we've gotten past the stage of the CV review, right? We've included our personal projects. We've looked at how we show passion in our CV. We're there. We're sat there. So what do we do? What are we likely to face in that interview? So the very first thing that's worthwhile putting across is common questions. Okay. Um, I can tell you some of the common questions I've been asked. Obviously, when we come to the discussion part, we can look at some of the common questions others might have faced. Um, but some of the common questions I've been asked, or generally sometimes ask, are things like, um, how do we manage error handling in Power Automate, right? Because what that's going to tell me as an interviewer is, okay, do you think about error handling? Do you think about, using the try catch conditions in scope, using scope method? You know, when we ask that, it's not a case of you need to know it, but it's, is it something you're thinking of, and is it something we're going to have to teach? The other thing I might ask is, have you ever used business process flows? How did you find them? What was your opinion on them? You know, have you used business rules? And depending on the level of the position kind of you're going for, you know, what's your opinion on business rules versus web resource scripts? Have you got any experience with web resource scripts? Um, these are kind of the common questions element. The other thing that you more than likely will get asked is what control do you use when it comes to designing responsive Canvas apps? Okay, so that's not a technical question. That's more of a design question. The reason for that is obviously when we're developing Canvas apps, a lot of the time we either develop them for when people are first starting, they'll either develop them for desktop or they'll develop them for mobile. They won't have thought about developing them for both and different screen resolutions and bits like that. These are questions that I have been asked, questions that I have asked myself. The other question you might get, and it's quite a broad and vague one, is what was one of your favorite projects that you've worked on? Why was it your favorite? What did you do with it? And then you'll probably get questions off the back of that. Okay. But these kind of questions are quite common. Kind of the what's your favorite project? What do you deal with in terms of error handling? Um, that kind of thing. What do you do for responsive app design? Um, you know, common little bits of information that they might pick up on. What's your experience of using Dataverse? How do you deal with permissions modeling is another thing in terms of, how would you deal with a team where the manager needs to be able to see everybody's records versus uh, you know the staff only being able to see their own. And it's testing that knowledge of what you know about the platform, what can the platform do. And again, going back to that be honest section in the overview, if you haven't done a project related to that question, but you know that the platform does that certain thing, you can turn around and you can say that. Um, you know, I haven't used it specifically in a project, but I am aware that Dataverse, for instance, has a security role set up that means that I can make sure that managers have the ability to see their staff's records through hierarchical permissions, right? So the other thing, interview tips. There's not always a lot of space on your CV to be able to put in the impact of the solutions you've built. So your interview is your chance to do that, right? So when you talk about the solutions that you've built, make sure you outline what the impact is, because this shows that you're actually looking at what the benefit is to the customer, the client. What I mean by that is a good instance to this is someone develops a ticket management solution or a safety audit solution. You say about that, you say how you built it, and you turn around and you say, hey, this resulted in the reduction of time in terms of it used to take them 3 hours to conduct a safety audit. Now it's 1.5 hours, and the error rate used to be 50%. Now 92% of all reports are completed without error. You know, um, again, personal projects and learning. Make sure you bring that up in the interview. Showing that willingness to learn in a platform that is ever changing, I cannot stress enough, is really important. Really, really important. It lends itself towards that piece of, as an employer taking you on, okay, you're going to progress, you're going to bring new skills to the table, and that thing. So, really, really good to kind of show. Now, I am about to move into the discussion piece. I can see we've got a few questions in the chat, so I'll try to answer them as much as I can. So in terms of CV samples, I'm actually more than happy, Manoj, to pop my CV in there as a sample. I can kind of look around, see if there's other CV samples in terms of CV templates that I've used in the past that are useful. But yeah, not a problem. We'll look to get those into the server so that people can have a good example of what they might look like. So, a remote opportunity. That's a good question. Manoj, I am a remote Power Platform developer. I make the choice once a month to go up to the office but I don't have to. I can be entirely remote if I want to, and actually a lot of roles within the Power Platform developer space, at least in kind of my country, are very much remote, which is really really useful. So, Mickey's made an absolute brilliant point here. So first things first. Hi, Mickey. Viewing personal projects with a lot more interest than something business driven, as they are something you've chosen to do. This is actually quite a common thing among multiple kind of hiring managers. If you turn around in an interview and tell me, hey, I did a personal project in my own time, because you're interested in that, I'm going to want to hear you talk about it. I'm going to want to hear what you did, how you did it, that kind of thing. So personal projects can actually really, really boost your employability. Um, so someone asked in terms of how many projects should be listed in the CV. Personally, I think, 4 for one employment and 2 for another, but this was me going for a senior Power Platform specialist role. Okay, if you're going for your first role, probably 4 projects total. I did 6 for kind of the higher end, and we kind of go from there. Really, it depends on how much detail you can provide about the project and also what the kind of technology used was and bits like that. Um, so given that, Mickey, again, another good point. I feel like I should invite you to speak on that front in terms of the structure of your answer. Um, Being precise and clear, give background, what the problem was, what the response was, what technology you used, and what the outcome was, is a really good way to do it. There is a well-known format that the UK civil service uses for its response. It's called the STAR format: situation, task, action, result. Okay? So what that means is you give one sentence on what the situation was that, or the problem was, around kind of why you were building the solution. The task was build a solution that did X, Y, Z, so you outline the requirements. Action is we built a system that used this, and this technology, and then deployed it, and then the result was it caused X, Y, Z, right? Situation, task, action, result is a brilliant format. Um, in terms of the question around how you show your solutions in your CV, so I'm actually going to swap across to my CV for now because I did have this open. As you can see, 4 pages, quite extensive, but you can see here key solutions delivered. So I had an outline of my role, my key solutions delivered. I discussed that it was a case management tool, and then put in what the Canvas apps, model-driven apps, cloud flows, Dataverse, business process flows, and security roles to become the single source of truth for managing user submissions, right? That very quickly kind of outlines it. It doesn't have to be a live demo, but if you're on a Teams call with the interviewer and you have the capability to go into a tenant in terms of looking at it like, on your own personal tenant and showing it, that's possible. I know I did it for my interview where I currently work. I had my own personal tenant open and I showed some of the personal stuff I've been doing. But yeah, embedded PowerPoint with a quick walkthrough is also an option there as well. Right, so that being said, I am going to open the stage up for anybody who wants to talk and ask questions. So if you do want to talk and you want to ask questions or you want to just have a discussion, kind of round table all of us together, feel free to. There's a button at the bottom of Discord that says ask to speak. Pop that on and I will approve and you basically come up. So does anybody want to speak? Okay then, if nobody does, one moment. Mickey's having audio issues. Okay. Jace, I know you've had recent kind of work with myself in terms of looking over your CV and kind of editing it and showing that. Um, how are you finding kind of the experience at the moment?
Let's see. Oh, well, wonderful. It's been a journey. It's difficult putting your own skills in perspective to how others might view them, right? Because since I learned something, then it was obviously easy and maybe not worth mentioning. But that is, from my own perspective, and it was easy for me, or, it felt natural to me. But um, trying to think about that situation, but from another point of view, from someone else's point of view. Yeah, it's a tricky skill to learn.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And actually, maybe this is a good point for kind of a final tip to some degree, from myself. You can always ask others about what your CV is and what your experience is. If there's someone who knows the industry relatively well, or knows around about the same amount as the industry as yourself, but they know you really well in terms of what you've done and what you've delivered, go and ask them. Say, hey, look, I'm thinking about putting like updating my CV. You know, this is what I've put so far. Is there anything I'm missing in terms of things like soft skills? Is there anything I can reframe, um, in terms of what I've done in the past and how I present that CV? Because I know through our discussions, Jace, that was what we ended up doing with yourself, in terms of reframing
Yeah.
some of your sales skills into that soft skills aspect.
Yeah, for sure. And you helped me understand points of views around all those soft skills. I would have never gotten to that conclusion. No matter how long I would have been thinking about it.
Hmm.
So yeah, having that outside perspective, I feel is extremely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those who are also in the chat, refined is who's popped message in the chat. He is actually one of my work colleagues. So he did six on his CV. I know there was a bit around how many projects we share. But yeah, six seems to be the the average number that we're doing between between me, refined, and a few others I've seen. I know some of the junior devs have done four. But yeah, in terms of obviously the discussion piece, kind of that that element around what you show, and what you put on your CV is really important. Um,
Considering where we're currently having this discussion, right, on the Power Up Challenge Discord,
mhm.
how would you view the challenge that we create in terms of projects on a CV, for example?
So this is interesting because that's a really good question. So from my aspect, obviously I've helped write, I think, most of the challenges so far, Jace, isn't that right? In terms of
Yeah,
reviews
yeah.
or written. Some of the challenges that have been out there, such as the second one, which was the ticket management system, right? The reason that was chosen is if you were to do that as a project and you fill out every single requirement on there, you've actually used a large percentage of the technology stack if you've built it in Dataverse, right? It gives you a good grounding. If I see that you've built a ticket management system in your spare time, from a challenge perspective, as a recruitment manager, that's a big thing, right? You've built something that is capable of, using model driven apps, using Dataverse, leveraging conditional access. Those those challenges are really useful in terms of that portfolio building. But not only that, the intent of obviously the challenges that you undertake it with kind of not minimal guidance, but how you might take it on in the real world. Okay, so you're using those troubleshooting skills, those self-directed learning skills to kind of build that up, and that's what's used. I'm gonna hold my hands up in the role I'm in. I spend around about maybe 20, 30, close to 40% of my day Googling things, searching up things, identifying, um, REST APIs for SharePoint. A lot of it is that. Um, Manoj has asked a really good question there. Is it necessary to learn Azure and DevOps as well as in terms of Power Apps with CI/CD pipelines? So that depends. It depends on the place you are going to in terms of the consultancy. The consultancy I'm working in is using Azure DevOps pipelines. I had to learn about them to run that, right? But it if you are going for, let's say, a more junior role rather than sat at the senior specialist level, you're probably going to already have those pipelines there. Someone's already going to have set them up or will be setting them up on your behalf. It is worthwhile learning about them, but not necessary. there's an interesting thing in terms of why a place might hire you, right? So the reason why I say about show the passion, show the capability for learning is if you are showing in your interview the capacity and capability for learning, but you're honest and you say, I don't know this, this, and this, but I have the capability to learn quickly and find that out, you are going to potentially be hired based on the fact of they may not know it now, but they'll put the effort in to learn. Um, I hope that answers your question, Manoj, in terms of, like I said, not necessary, but it's a nice to have. We do have the advent of Power Platform pipelines now as well, which I think I did a session once on actually how to set them up and how easy they are to set up and run. Um, if it hasn't been presented here, I'm more than happy to present it again. But with the advent of those, it becomes a lot easier. And actually, Microsoft have recently implemented a new thing called Connect to Git. Uh, Ah, yes. This is dependent on the market that you work in, yeah. Quite tough. So in terms of that then, so this thing you've got to adjust based upon the market you're in. If if they're saying you're supposed to know everything, that's kind of it's a balance to strike. You're not if anybody and I'm going to put my hand on my heart. If anybody confesses to know absolutely everything about Power Platform, um, I don't believe that's entirely possible purely because it changes every day. Like we've seen today in, for instance, Teams, something new's popped up with a 3D working space. In terms of that, from an actual like working with the clients I've worked with, I've maybe used Azure DevOps in a client once. In terms of the pipelines part of Azure DevOps, we have done DevOps board and kind of task managing through that and Jira boards and things like that. But that's more project management than it is, you know, CI/CD pipelines. Yeah, Mickey's hit the nail on the head. Then for Power App solutions, he's right. Generally, as long as everything is within a solution, the Power Apps pipelines works great. It's when you've got stuff outside of that solution, like for instance Power BI reports, it becomes a bit of a nightmare. Yes, very, very, very true, Manoj. They do change every second day, and no release notes. So, yeah. Thank you for listening. I hope you found it useful and got to learn something new, and I'll see you in the next one.